Unknown caller.
Wouldn't you know it, getting a phone call right when you're on a webinar. Hello, yes, this is the WCA webinar series. We'll be starting in just a few seconds. We're just going to wait until everyone's logged in, although everyone probably had time to do so during the minute silence. So hopefully we see everyone in pretty soon. Numbers are looking pretty good. Look, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ruth Harris. I'm the Executive Officer at Wine Communicators of Australia. Thank you for joining us for this month's WCA webinar on trade connections. Here today, you'll hear tips on engaging with the on and off trade. I'm coming to you from the land of the Kaurna people in South Australia, and our presenters are on the lands of the Kulin Nation in southeast Victoria. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands that you're all working on today as well as their strong connection to the country and the seasons. So today's chat will take probably about 45 minutes and there'll be time for questions at the end. So please just ask your questions in the Q&A button. So if you look at your screen, you can see two boxes. There'll be the chat button, which you can use just for technical issues if you can't hear or something like that. But if you want to ask the presenters a question, please use the Q&A button that you see down there, the Q&A box. The Q&A box, those questions are actually saved by Zoom. So if we don't get to them all today, we can actually contact you after the webinar to answer questions. As usual, this webinar will be recorded and a link to the recording will be sent to you if you wish to watch the content again. So today we're going to talk about how to best engage with the on and off trade, and you'll hear from three experts who'll share insights about connecting with buyers, sommeliers and the retail trade. You might even be wondering why our webinar started today at a different time, not our usual lunch hour. Well, that is because the first tip of working with the trade is that you don't call on an on-premise account during service times. So we have avoided those times because they're not available. I'll start by introducing you to Emily Sharland, who's co-chair of our Victorian State chapter, and she'll moderate today's session. Emily is a marketing communication specialist with 20 years experience managing luxury brands in wine, tourism, hospitality and lifestyle industries. She was head of marketing communications for Vas Felix and has worked for Savaterra, Forest Hill Vineyard, Margaret River Wine Association and Negociants. So I'll now hand you over to Emily, who will introduce our guests. Keep thinking of your questions and remember to put them in the Q&A box. Over to you, Emily.
Thanks so much, Ruth. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for tuning in from all of the various time zones, especially I'll mention my friends from Western Australia who are up bright and early to enjoy the chats this morning. So the background of today, we as a Victorian chapter were looking at the programming for for what was important as a wine communicator right now. And one of the things that I always find incredibly valuable as a marketer is making sure that we're really engaging with the people who drink wine and at the front line, either making choices and curating the wines that consumers can taste and drink, or conversely on the floor chatting, or a winery out there in the trade making lots of things happen. And at a macro level, we're naturally hearing a lot about the struggles that we face as an industry and as a category and as a beverage. And so we thought, what better way than to get to the bottom and really get to what's exciting and interesting and happening in the region and how we can best maximize our footprint as wine owners or wine marketers, and assembled a panel of a sommelier, a retail buyer, and a lead winery marketing and sales head of department. And between us, I'm pretty excited because we've got a pretty cracking panel today. I'm genuinely looking forward to hearing what the crew are going to say. So first and foremost, I'm going to introduce everyone and just get a quick background. I'm going to start with Xavier Viguier. And importantly, I want to make a special shout out to Xavier. He literally just won Wine List of the Year for Circle Winehouse, one of the hottest restaurants in Melbourne with a huge wine program. And it's not the first time that one of his venues has done this. Previously, he's also had similar success with 10 Minutes by Tractor. So I couldn't think of someone better who has a better grasp on what people are drinking when it comes to wine right now than Xavier. Xavier, could you tell us a little bit of background? Welcome, first and foremost, and a bit of a background of your wine journey and the wine list that you curate at Circle Winehouse.
Of course, thank you, Emily, for the introduction. My name is Xavier. I'm currently venue manager and head sommelier at Go, but the project has been running for more than 3.5 years.
Xavier, we might just come back to your internet's dropping out a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
It's not great. I might introduce Chanel and I'll come back to you in a couple of minutes if that's okay. We'll let Xavier just have a quick look at his connection. So Chanel Hurley is the head of independent sales, retail and on-premise for Penfolds and the Treasury Wine Estate. And naturally, Penfolds, I think, is one of the most important brands in terms of putting wine on the global map for Australia, and have a huge amount of programming that they put in place to make sure that their wines are getting in front of the right consumers and also pulling through. So Chanel, could you tell me a little bit about your journey into the wine industry and specifically your role at Penfolds?
Of course. Thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. My journey is probably not so wine-led up until this point in my career. I spent 15 years in snacking and confectionery before joining Penfolds and Treasury 2 years ago. Most of my career has been in commercial roles. So, sales, working with, large national accounts, selling Cadbury chocolate, and then more so in category revenue and revenue management from a strategy perspective. So I was lucky enough to join the world of Penfolds 2 years ago. And as Emily said, I head up our independent retail and on-premise world here. My team is a team of 22. So the largest, commercial sales team within ANZ. And that's obviously really important when it comes to talking around independent retail and on-premise because of the large level of diversity that exists within the channel. So I would say that my days are never the same. One day I might be meeting with head of procurement or food and beverage directors in large kind of tier 1 or tier 2 on-premise accounts. The next I might be building out our 5-year unconstrained supply predictions on, how much volume we need, in the short term and also the long term, as well as a lot of time with the team. I'm really passionate about being out in trade, meeting with as many outlets and venues as I can myself, but also coaching and developing the team and making sure that we're fit for purpose and also ready for the future.
Wonderful, thank you. And it looks like Xavier's found some better internet connections, so I'll hand back over to you, Xavier.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Sorry about that. So my name is Xavier. I'm currently venue manager and head sommelier at a restaurant called Circle, which is located in Melbourne CBD. As Emily said, we've got awarded Best Wine List in Australia alongside 8 other awards, which we're very proud of. Of course, it's years in the making, but it's also a vision that reflects a bit the change of consumption behavior. And basically, the vision behind Circle was to empower the access and knowledge to the world of wine. And the way we've done it was through a really long and extensive wine by the glass program, which is currently sitting at roughly 210 wines. Everything has been preserved through core Avin system, so it's working very well. We also have a huge amount of wine by the bottle. Previously worked at 10 Minutes by Tractor, where I did similar things, however, in a wine region, which was really special. We're focusing a lot on the unicorns of the world, but I must say we've spent a lot of time and effort into building a really strong Australian offering. obviously with a few different layers, including the Australian alternative, as well as the most iconic and the really old and rare stuff that you find, especially in South Australia. So we're very lucky to be in the place where we are today, and yeah, we're working roughly with 150 suppliers. So it's creating a lot of work for everyone involved, but we managed to get something quite diverse. So yeah, that's for me.
Wonderful. Thanks, Xavier. And finally, we've got Robert Atkin. He is the fine wine category manager for the East Coast of Australia with Endeavour Group and Dan Murphy's. So also curating a significant amount of wines being produced in Australia. So Rob, can you tell us a little bit about your journey and your role at Endeavour?
Hi, Emily. Thanks for having me on the webinar today. Yeah, as you said, I'm the category manager for a little boutique company called Endeavour Drinks Group. We have brands such as Dan Murphy's, BWS. We also have Langton's in the group as well, as among as some other businesses as well. But yeah, my focus is on the East Coast of Australia. So I guess it probably helps to frame up what our broader team does at Endeavour. So we have a commercial wine team that sort of looks after our top 30 suppliers by volume. And then in the fine wine team, which I look after the East Coast, we look after the other sort of 800 or so, sort of small to medium sized winery, direct partners, and also distributors as well, as among as agents as well. So yeah, as I said, quite a big supply base. We cover a lot of regions and a lot of retail footprint as well. But very exciting time to be in retail. And I guess my journey, I've been in wine for about 15 years now, mainly in retail. I've done a little bit of work on trade as well. But really, yeah, one of my first jobs was in wine, so I haven't really left since then. So I've been enjoying it. So yeah, don't think I'll leave for a while now.
Perfect. Well, Rob, whilst I've got you on screen in full view here, the next thing we're really keen to explore is, I guess, what is exciting or important or interesting for customers right now? And we're going to have a bit of a take from everyone's perspective. So from an Dan Murphy's point of view, what's really working?
Yeah, I was having a good think about this last night, and obviously probably one of the big ones on everyone's minds, probably consumption, and I guess the sort of challenges with, I guess, people not drinking as much. So I guess it offers a bit of a flip side for me, in the fact it is a big challenge that people are consuming less. Obviously got sort of younger generations changing their consumer habits and the way they're drinking, the occasions they're drinking in. But I think for me, it offers a real opportunity for wineries right now. I think we've seen a really fast or increasing volume decline in the last 12 to 18 months. But I think the brands that have been really successful have probably really lent into the challenge, whether that's premiumizing the price points or just speaking to younger consumers in a different way. So I think that's for the wineries that are really leaning and being proactive. I think it really is opening up some great opportunities. I think varietally as well, there's some really exciting stuff happening from a Pinot and Chardonnay point of view. I think when I started in wine 15 years ago, there wasn't a lot of broad diversity or quality that we have now in Pinot Noir, at least. So I think in Australia, to be able to have really consistent supply at all price points for Pinot Noir has been really exciting from a broader diversity of regions, whether it's the Yarra, Mornington, Gippsland, Tassie now, making amazing Pinot Noir as well. And I think consumers, especially in the last 5 years, have really jumped onto Pinot because of that access to great quality at good price points. So I'm really excited to see where that goes, from, whether it's viticulture and clonal stuff or different regions coming on board with Pinot. So I think there's a lot of excitement in that space. I think Chardonnay's been around for a long time, but we're probably seeing the best moment to be drinking and making Chardonnay. I think the diversity of styles has been phenomenal. And, there is some polarization of styles now. People are leaning into big buttery styles, which is just people coming back to what they drank in the 80s and 90s, which I think is great. It's, coming back to those styles, or there's been a resurgence of sort of lighter zingy style Chablis really flying for us at the moment in retail. But there's also been this wave of people coming into, I guess, more balanced, more middle of the road styles as well. So really excited to see where those go in the next couple of years. But there've also been two varieties that have premiumized quite well. So I think they've really built really strong premium brands on the whole, and then regions, like Yarra and Mornington and Tassie have really lent into both of those and be able to create their own premium brands within that. The other one for me, I guess, from an insights point of view, we're pretty lucky at Endeavour. We get quite a lot of data. We've got insights teams as well, so we get lots of access to it, and it really helps us drive decisions as buyers. So I do appreciate that every day, and we were lucky enough to release one of our sort of flagship reports called State of the Grapes recently, and that really gives, if no one's read it, I'd recommend reading it. It really gives good insight into what's going on in the market from a retail point of view now. And I think like the big highlight for me is, drinkers are parochial, which I think we always knew, but this report really highlights like each state's going to operate really differently. So as a producer, you really need to think about what's your strategy at a state level and how you're going to tackle each of those markets and channels within each state. And then the other exciting things from retail, Spritz has been going bonkers over the last 2 years for us. I think that's been really exciting. Again, it's a way to sort of connect with young consumers as a gateway to bring them into the wine category, albeit maybe not a traditional wine product, but adjacent, and gets them on the journey of consuming a wine-based product. So yeah, lots of exciting stuff happening at the moment, albeit challenges. I think a good time to be in retail at the moment.
Yeah, amazing. That's really insightful. And I was having a look at the report that Dan Murphy's or Endeavour Group released earlier this year, and the themes you talk about in terms of focusing on state level and yeah, some of these fresher wine styles and spritzes for the new generation as interesting talking points. How is that translating for you, Xavier, at a on-premise level? What are you finding that your customers are really into over the last year, or anything coming into the next season as well?
Look, I'm going to be quite honest with you. We haven't seen so much of a decrease in consumption on our end, and I think one of the most important vector for us is because we are offering a lot of wine by the glass with different pouring sizes, and the advantage of that is that people do get to try a lot of different wines. So what I'm excited about and what's exciting is to see whether it's Gen Z, the millennial, or everyone involved when they're dining here, is the real enthusiasm around let's try something different and let's try. But I guess I reflect on what you were saying, Rob, before. There's definitely Pinot Noir and Chardonnay are the strongest grape variety when it comes down to volume and value for us. But we have to be quite specific with what we're offering. We can't just put a cheap Chardonnay because we have to have a cheap Chardonnay. People are definitely looking at drinking, quality producers. And that brings me back to the next stage of this answer is I'm very excited to see a lot more wineries in Australia spending time to, build the narrative around the brand and really trying to understand the area they're working in and the history and really drill into that, because what we're seeing is people do want to have that background of story. They want to be drinking a part of the community. They don't want to drink just to drink, and I think that's probably the massive shift. The other really exciting part, which I think it's stunning, and we need to keep pressing the button on that, is the alternative Australian, the new generation of drinkers that might not have big budget on wine, can actually have an exciting experience with this alternative. It tells a different story. It brings us closer to who drinks those wines. And in all corners of the country, we do have grape variety popping up. And I encourage everyone that works in this industry to keep pushing, because it's exciting for us. We stepping away from the need of having a cheap Sauvignon Blanc, a cheap grape variety that we know, and really put forward this next generation of styles, Vermentino, Fiano, Sangiovese, all of these really work in a restaurant purposes. So that's one of the major thing. I'm glad to see that people are keen to delve into the wine by the glass selection that we have provided them with. We're seeing a lot less bottle consumption, and that's probably people want to have a bit more control within their experience. And I think that's to me, this is what the new trend is going to be like in the 2026 and going forward in the restaurant landscape, is definitely offering more, better, and more accurate wine by the glass. And I think the last part is I'm so excited to see Australia flourishing and starting to see brands that are really expensive that offers a little bit of that sort of counter answer to Burgundy and Bordeaux, and I'm really keen to see more small producer coming to fruition. So I think we are at the good time. We are at a good place in Australia. The landscape is fascinating. We have access to so many back vintages. In our wine list, we have wines from wines dating back from the 80s and 70s, and I think that the nice balance between the icons and the up and comers is pretty spectacular in Australia.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that point you made around the story, and I guess the idea of drinkers loving this option to choose a few different choices through by the glass is really interesting. And in the next section, we'll talk a little bit more about, particularly, I'm quite interested to hear about from the storytelling what matters to you as a somm. So we'll come back to that shortly. Thanks so much, Xavier.
No worries.
Chanel, so from a Penfolds perspective, so you're looking after the on-premise and the retail channels. What are you seeing in terms of the product mix across the portfolio from a price point and style point of view, but also like what other insights are driving how you make your strategies?
I pretty much would reiterate exactly what Xavier and Ben have said. We're obviously in a pretty challenging environment, across retail and on premise. There's obviously lots of green shoots which are really positive, but consumers are being more considered with how and where they spend their money. For us, with a brand that's 180 years old, we're feeling really, buoyant around what the next few years look like for us specifically. Premiumization is a real thing. And I guess, a lot of the conversations that we're having with the retail landscape, so off-prem and on-prem, is around feeling confident that consumers are going to be willing to trade up. It's not to say they're going to move from a $100 bottle to a $700 bottle, but finding that middle ground is important because it gives them the option. We use a lot of different data sets in our day-to-day world through U&A studies, looking at consumers and hearing from consumers specifically on what's important to them. Once we get those data points, we're then able to be really targeted around where we focus our energy and our time. Penfolds as a brand, we're not going to be stretching into new varietals and call it trend-based varietals. We'll stick to what's core for us. Quality is obviously at the heart of everything we do at Penfolds and how we blend. But that's our message out in trade. We can play a role in providing consumers a level of, trust of if they're going to, spend their hard-earned money, they know what they're going to get. And that's how we leverage our quality in our portfolio. We, based off the U&A studies that we've completed, we continue to look at other opportunities. So we may not be able to go down the varietal route, but we'll leverage what's important to our brand in blend. So we're now obviously producing out of France and also the US, as well as recently out of China. So, we'll continue to evolve our portfolio by, looking to other regions where we can continue, our Penfolds recipe essentially, but also doing things differently. So yeah, it's not so easy out there. I'd say, the team play a really important role, especially when looking at premium products in, hand selling and being out in trade, liquid on lips, all of those things that you think are quite basic are really important for a premium brand like ours. It doesn't just sell itself. So we have to continually, advocate and educate out in trade so that, our story, which we know and love, others are able to kind of learn along the way and then be able to use that, when, talking to consumers around a wine list or recommending a particular bottle to support maybe a fish-based menu or something like that. So yeah, we're continuing to evolve. It's 180 years is a long time, but we're still doing things differently, and I think that's important.
Absolutely. I think two things that you mentioned in there, I'm certainly finding the same from my wine client work as well, is one, the theme around people buying less but buying better. So I think that seems to be continuing, and it certainly seems to be a trend of the sort of millennial generation. And yeah, that critical point of storytelling. And I think some people as well think that once you have your brand reputation established, you can sort of sit back and relax. But I can imagine yourself, like myself and brands I've worked on, you work harder than ever to keep that relevance, because there's always exciting new varieties and new trends popping up, when you do stay that course of being focused on one variety or a handful of varieties that you can best represent. So Xavier, back to your point around then storytelling. So we've heard a little bit about what Penfolds do to keep their story alive. What's important to you when you're taking an appointment with a winery? What do you want to hear about the wines, and what's really going to connect with then your customers?
Look, I think the first part is obviously wine talks for itself. The things that I don't want to see, and I think that we've had a great change over the years, is the comparison between, especially when it comes down to Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, the comparison with Burgundy. I think that's a bit outdated, and I've seen a lot of people coming through the restaurants as winemakers that actually truly embody what Australia wine industry is, right? And I think that it needs to keep the narrative around, what it means to be in Macedon Ranges, what it means to be in Margaret River, what it means to be in those sub-districts of each big and large wine region. And I think that the more we're gonna, the more the winemaker will come with the wine telling the story about the region, the more informed all sommelier and the industry will be, which then can give a lot of idea around how do we then work the wine list, and how do we classify the wines, and how do we put the wine into the context of dining. So at Circle, for example, I have created a wine pairing called the Australian Alternative, and it's a way for people to, when they choose to go for the set menu, to actually discover what it means. And I think that's one step. Other steps are writing small things on the wine list, such as the name of the producer, when was the winery established. So that gives a bit of context. We have to create a context and then dig into the more nitty-gritty. But I think it's important when you're at a table to really remain relatively, wouldn't say exotic because it's not the right word, but just tell the big picture. People don't really care about the way it's made. We need to create a context again for people to understand what they're drinking, if that makes sense. And if someone asks, of course, how much SO2 is in there, and how much oak, that's for those who really want it. But I think the sometimes the danger of restaurant is to go too hard on those details, and then people kind of like after 20 seconds they no longer listen to what you have to say. So when a winery comes to the restaurant, I think when a winemaker comes to see sommeliers, I think it's important to set up the big picture, tell the story about the area, about maybe climatology, soils, and really spend a bit less time in talking about winemaking technique, because you want to inspire those who are actually selling the wines. And we don't inspire people by telling how many days on skins that wine has spent. So I think there is a bit more of that narrative that needs to happen, but it's happening. Like lately we've had Meadowbank coming to the restaurant, and it was fantastic. We've got plenty of good example of that happening. So
yeah, amazing. So yeah, leading with that region, with the site, with the place, with what makes it unique and interesting to grow those grapes, and then follow with how you might make it as requested.
and also the personality of the winemaker. Who are you? Where are you coming from? Who is the team behind it? You know, like sort of course, you can touch about viticulture, but you know, looking at long term is okay. We've set up the new vineyard. It's planted with Chenin Blanc, and this is where we want to go in the future. Having that vision and the way and portraying it also almost allows your sommelier to come with you within this journey and invite the sommelier to follow you through the years. So, yeah.
Fantastic. So yeah, being pointed and focused on that. What's it all about? Why are you making wine, and what's the long term?
That's right.
Brilliant. I mean, that makes sense, and I think that that's a very healthy approach to anyone in any sort of business, but especially in the wine industry right now. Over to you then, Rob. What are you finding? Yeah, what's the best way to engage with you and with Dan Murphy's?
Yeah, thanks, Emily. I guess yeah, as I said before, like we have two very separate teams, and I guess the reason we create a fine wine team and a commercial team is we like to think that suppliers need different levels of conversation and different sort of engagement. And that's why we've been on this journey for about 6 years with a fine wine and commercial team. And you probably engage quite differently with probably my colleagues in the commercial team, with probably how you engage with someone like myself. But I guess for Endeavour, we do 3 major range reviews throughout the year. So we do one for red, one for white, one for sparkling. And they're sort of our key times to make our major sort of ranging decisions. As you can imagine, there's a lot of stores, there's a lot of ranging combinations. We get down to sort of single store ranging now, whereas say 20 years ago, it was one national range. We went to state, and now we, have thousands of combinations of ranges. So it takes us about almost 12 months to do a range review. So we sort of land one, and then we sort of a month later, we already start for the next year. So it's a really long process. But for all those big decisions, that's the best time to engage us. We do send out a fairly detailed brief to our entire supply base, which really tries to give guidance about what we're looking for in those reviews. And we've probably gotten a lot more targeted over the time, where it was sort of a really broad review. We're quite selective about what we're looking for at different price points, varietals, especially with changing sort of consumer behaviors. But in saying that, we also do a lot of ad hoc ranging, whether it's local or premium job buys and things throughout the year as well. So we're always open to be talking throughout the year. I guess the one thing is, like, as I said, we have really large supply bases. So, probably be conscious of major retailers and the buyers' times. Probably a little bit different to, restaurants. Monday morning's probably the worst time to speak to a major retailer buyer, because we're doing reporting for sort of most of the morning, and the afternoon we'll probably do more reporting. So it's probably later in the week you want to speak to us. But I guess, yeah, be conscious of our time, be really pointed in what you want to do, and probably be realistic about what you want to get out of the relationship with a major retailer. I think the obvious misconception is that, we have lots of stores, and, you can go from 0 to 1,800 stores in our network quite quickly. But in my experience, the best relationships we build obviously start quite small, and we grow them over time. It's really rare for brands to go into our entire network straight away. So probably just be conscious about what your channel strategy is. Be realistic about where you want to start your brand, how you want to grow it. And we're not the be all and end all. It should be a part of your overall broader plan for your brand to grow over time. And in saying that, we can do everything from 1 to 1,800 stores and in between. So there's a lot of opportunity, but, just be, have a plan and what you actually want to go after with a big retailer like us. And I guess to sort of Xavier's point about brands and what we're seeing at the moment, I guess we are a broad church, and we speak to lots of different customer times of lots of different shopper missions and formats in our stores. And I think, communicating with customers should be the same thing. We shouldn't communicate to one customer the way we communicate to another customer. I think, a $1,000 dinner that we run through Langton, speaking about high-end Burgundy, we're going to speak about in a different way to maybe a sort of large-scale champagne event where people are tasting 100 wines in 2 hours, and the level of information and the level of engagement needs to be quite different. So I think wineries and brands should be really conscious about knowing their customer that they speak to and the way they're going to speak to them, especially with younger customers now. They really want to be spoken to a different way, and they want to engage with brands differently. So spend the time, be proactive, understand your market and your channel really well, so that you can, you know, really create really bespoke plans for each customer you want to speak to.
Wonderful. Thanks, Rob. Just a quick question. I'm going slightly off the prepared script, but to what extent could wineries be, if they do get a listing, engaging with merchants? Is there a formal approach to that side of helping share the story and get the knowledge enhanced through at a store level?
Yeah, definitely. It's probably like the one thing or the greatest level of engagement that a sort of supplier can do with our teams. Like I tell every supplier, the more you get out into our store networks and speak to, whether it's store managers or fulfillment managers or wine merchants, like the experts in our stores, the more you speak with them and share your brand, you're going to have more advocates for your brand in our stores, and they're going to be more powerful to sell your wine in our stores. We have a lot of forums, whether it's virtual tasting schedules, we do quarterlies where we do sort of bigger sessions with merchants as well. But getting in there and we do dinners and things with merchants. So there's a whole level of different sort of forums we open up for suppliers to engage with those teams. But getting in the store, showing the wines on a regular basis, having consumer events in stores, whether it's a Friday night tasting or Saturday, super powerful. So the more proactive you can be in those sense, I think the more you, and our best suppliers and our best wineries do lots of it. So that's an easy one to get right.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Rob. And Chanel, what's your approach to engaging in the on-premise and off-premise channels?
I would say there's no one size fits all approach for us in the Indies landscape. If I talk retail first, we obviously work really closely with all major banners, across the landscape, and they will all have formal processes in terms of range reviews and premium programs which they run throughout their calendar. So we obviously make sure that we're fully prepared, talking to category opportunities, trends, the role that we can play as a brand, and specifically from a product or varietal perspective, through that formal process. There's also a lot of informal bits that need to occur as well, in how we're engaging with committee members across major banners. Each state and banner will likely have a committee that they are the custodian of the decision making for independent retailers. So it's important that we engage with them as well. And then, it's the last step, but almost the most important step is how we're out in trade, hand selling and engaging with the right venues and the right outlets. It's not around trying to have all of our products in every single store. It's about right product for right store, understanding that store's demographic, who their consumer is, how our portfolio is historically performed in there, where the opportunities are, what does the category look like in there, how does their pricing match versus the nationals. So retail's kind of a three-pronged attack: banner level, committee level, and then in hands and feet in stores, talking to store owners and store managers, with liquid on lips being the most important component there as well, in making sure that as we talk to the wine, we can really showcase the wine and allow them to taste it for themselves. From an on-premise perspective, it's liquid on lips. This as a sub channel is incredibly important in any brand, building their relevance, growing their visibility, allowing consumers to have the opportunity to taste. And obviously Xavier spoke around his extensive by the glass offering. That makes total sense, right? Because it means that consumers are able to, and we know that this is what they want to do, they have much broader repertoires now. They want to be able to have a glass of champagne and then move to a rosé and then maybe move to a glass of red as they eat something more heavy. So we're really focused around by the glass and the role that we can play there. We also spend a lot of time educating, and I spoke to it before, but talking to our story. The storytelling component for us is important. especially with a portfolio that's quite large, and, you know, helping sommeliers or even in-store people understand what is bin 389, you know, how is that differentiate to other numbers that exist within our portfolio. And you know, we've recently essentially built some education cards that can, you know, go out into venues and in stores to support those with, you know, call it low or entry level wine knowledge, that are able to then I guess, communicate with a consumer around what's the right product based off what they're looking for. So how do you talk to a Chardonnay, or how do you talk to a Shiraz out of our portfolio, rather than getting lost amongst lots of information and them not really being able to not being sure how to navigate. So yeah, we spend a lot of time, I would say, across the year. We would, you know, formally run 200 or 300 education sessions with retail and on-premise venues, training front of staff, working with somms, etc. So an important part of our strategy at Penfolds.
Fantastic. One point that has come up a couple of times in today's chat has been around talking to younger consumers, and there's a couple of questions that have come through as well. So I thought, whilst we're still in this place around, so I think absolutely having some sort of education training program, and certainly that echoes my experience as well, that there's an absolute hunger and thirst for those up and coming people working in wine to really get to the heart of what those stories are. And I've seen that interest shift fundamentally. I think that sort of food and wine, I always almost bring it back to the MasterChef shift that happened across Australia over the, you know, a decade ago, and what that did for food. I feel that the same is happening for wine, and people are really getting interested in what is happening. But how are you finding that, Xavier, when you, and Rob, I might talk to you both on this question. When you're talking to, you know, someone that's in one of your shops or in your restaurant, Xavier, and they're in their, I don't know, 20s, and they're interested in wine, what's the conversation? What are you finding is piquing interest?
Look, it's a good question, and I think it's not a question we can answer with just one sentence. It's quite nuanced. I think that before we even get to how do we talk to them, we have to create a context in which they feel comfortable, and I think that comes with the service, the way how the wine is to serve, what's your marketing like around the business. Once all of that is sorted and you have all the baseline, then people coming in, and whether you're young or you're expert or you're not expert, you just get talked in such a way that you're as if you're part of it already. And I think that inclusivity is massive, because it allows the younger crowd to actually ask questions they would not ask if they were in a situation where they feel uncomfortable. So the best thing we can do and control, it's set up the context for them. Then after, everyone is so different that, you know, it takes all sort of shape, colors, and formalities to do it. But yeah, I think you have to think about you really have to think about the environment that you've created for it, especially in a restaurant. I'm not sure about retail because it's a bit different, but from a restaurant perspective, if the atmosphere is warm, the people that work on the floor are warm, and you know, people get welcome to the place, you know, as if they were friends, suddenly creates already a relationship, if that makes sense. And then for the wine, you have to have the options available where you can again offer an incredible experience at a relatively low cost. And that's where, to me, the alternative Australian plays a massive role in this, because we are able to give the power to the younger crowd to drink Australian and not having to spend a lot of money.
Brilliant. Rob, you mentioned as well a slightly different vocabulary or approach to the language around wine. What are you finding?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with Xavier around making younger consumers comfortable. I think historically wine has been quite exclusive. I guess the terminology, you sort of got to be in the know to understand how wine's talked about. And I think younger consumers are sort of pushing back against that at the moment. So I think using sort of down to earth language probably talking a little bit more about brand and story, a bit more experiential rather than being so focused on the detail and the nitty gritty of wine is quite important. I guess for retail, often like bricks and mortar is still super important for us, but I think it probably starts from an e-com point of view. We've done a lot of work we've got a platform called Dan's Daily. So creating content that can help younger consumers understand about wine in really basic language, whether it's regional, brand led, varietal led. I think just breaking those barriers down before they get in the store is quite important. And then in store, obviously, we've got wine experts in our top store who are there to sort of break some of those terminologies down for consumers, but also the way we set up the stores, the formats. Like, I'm sure anyone that's walked into a Dan Murphy store, it's quite intimidating looking at 500 Shirazes on the shelf. So we're definitely trying to find ways to make it easier to navigate our shelves, whether it's QR codes or on pack, things like that, to really sort of make it less daunting, sort of finding the best bottle. But I think it starts before they get in the shop. And then creating that knowledge and customer service, which is a big focus for us at the moment, whether it's our in-house training programs or WCT level 2, giving our team more confidence to sell wine in a way that young people are comfortable sort of doing. So definitely not perfect at it yet, and I think that's probably the next sort of evolution for wine retail is how do we sort of make it less daunting to shop big shelves of wine.
Absolutely. Experiential, I think, is a really valid point. And I might throw this one to you, Chanel, because arguably Penfolds, your program of events and experiential opportunities to, I guess, take in fresh way to bring people into the fold of wine and get people excited is second to none. We were talking briefly, I saw an ad pop up, I think, or a story pop up overnight about a new pop-up that you have for Christmas at Chadstone Shopping Centre. So for those who aren't from Victoria, one of the biggest, most respected luxury sort of shopping centres in Melbourne. Can you talk through a little bit of that part of your strategy and what the intent is with that particular activation?
Absolutely. Everything we do has a purpose, and that's around how we better, I guess, engage with our core consumer, but then also target our new consumer or our focus consumer group. So we talk a lot around the classic connoisseur and a status connoisseur. So the status connoisseur is that kind of younger demographic or younger consumer who, has a much higher understanding of wine and a better, I guess, repertoire of wine and willingness to try new things. So they're really important for us to continue to focus on and grow. And then our classic connoisseur is the classic connoisseur of a Penfolds wine. And they're our heartland and have been our bread and butter in terms of consumer set for a very long time. So, these sorts of things that, we lead out in market is to, talk to that new status connoisseur and engage them with the brand in a really exciting and authentic way. It's not any surprise that the timing of this is leading into Christmas. So, we talk around making sure that when we show up, we're talking to the right occasions as well. So we're really specific on when we do bring experiences to life that they're linked to a core or a key occasion. So this is obviously for Christmas and holiday. And then, the product that we're talking to within these experiences are always really, I guess, targeted as well, and making sure that, in this instance with the pop-up, we're talking around our multi-country of origin portfolio, and, the range that is there specifically has been packaged up in really, I guess, like high quality gift boxes and gift tins that talk to our above the line campaigns. So, everything we're doing is really targeted. That's a perfect example as one. And then, in terms of how we show up more naturally in trade, we'll then see our displays in stores that link to the same thematic and theming as the pop-up, as well as then, from an on-premise perspective, the team will be out actively talking around our French portfolio, for example. So everything we do is linked to the occasion. It's linked to a really clear part of our portfolio and focused around how we can engage with our target consumers of the status and the classic connoisseur.
Brilliant. What another topical question, this is have come through on the feed, is around how much of at the forefront is sustainability in your conversations or in the conversations and expectations of your wine drinkers?
You go.
Did you want to start, Chanel, and then we'll hear what Xavier has to say?
Yeah, sure.
From point of view.
I'd say from our perspective, it's quite mixed across the trade. You know, there's no hard and fast rule when it comes to how we approach sustainability conversations. We're obviously incredibly proud of the role that we play and how we invest. But it's important that we're able to kind of break that down and make it really easy for people to understand. You know, a 30-page document around our sustainability program and kind of outputs, you know, is too much. So but that's important for some customers. It's you know, how we chunk it down into really palatable nuggets for others that may be interested. But you know, I would say as a whole it doesn't lead conversations, and not every conversation will open up with it, but it's important to some.
Yeah, absolutely. And Xavier, how does that translate on the floor for you?
Look, I think we arrived to such a great understanding of all these things that sustainability has become the baseline where it is expected. So there is not even the conversation around it. Anything that's not ethical will then be brought up and questioned. But the majority, when our guests coming to restaurants that are well thought and that are practicing, you know, these things every day, it's not even part of the conversation because it's expected. It's expected that the leaders of each business have an understanding of how sustainability can affect and impact the business, and any non-ethical behavior will then be put on the spotlight, if that makes sense. But yeah.
Absolutely. And Rob, anything on your end that's evolving in that space in terms of buying decisions?
Yeah, I'll probably sit in both camps, I guess. Yeah, I think there's a level of baseline of what customers expect, from the production side to even the retail side, like us operating as business operators, last mile delivery, all those things I think are coming into customer decisions. I'd say for the broad, like for our customer, obviously, again, we're quite a broad church, but I'd say it's definitely not the first priority on a customer's decision tree. It's probably somewhere in the middle. But there's a broad expectation that we have a level of sustainability, and we're trying to improve that over time, and the same with the brands we work with as well.
Brilliant. So we're coming down to our last 5 minutes of our chat, and I thought I would just leave one final question for everyone. If you could talk about one thing that's going to be the biggest priority in your business for the next 12 to 24 months, given some of the themes we've talked about, and one tip for wineries for the next 12 months in terms of their planning or how they might engage you, or it's a broad umbrella. So Rob, I'll start with you.
I'm going to quickly talk about 4 things that I think are exciting. So I'm going to be super fast instead of one. I think for us in retail, like new product is always really important. So we're going to continue to find new and exciting products, which is not always the easiest thing for wine. Like we know how long it takes to produce wine products, but new product continues to be a bigger part of our sales each year. So we'll continue to do that. I think from adaptability, I think changing to consumer behavior is going to get even faster as people change how they drink. So brands that do that are going to become even more important over time. I think varietally, I think these up and coming varietals, at least for retail, Sangiovese, Fiano, even Nebbiolo starting to take off, I think as well will be really important, and we'll be champions to talk to those varietals more and give great examples to customers to try. And I think the last one, as I said at the start, I think as volume sort of continues to probably decline over time, I think even more important how we add value beyond price. So whether it's experience or storytelling is going to get really important in the next sort of 2 to 5 years. And then I guess the tip for wineries out there, I think, really be clear about what your brand stands for. I think that's really important. Know your customers really well and really know your channel and have a really good strategy around it. Because there's a lot of noise in the market, not just in liquor, but for customers everywhere. They're getting hit from all angles. So be really clear at how you target your customers.
Thanks, Rob. Chanel.
I've got 3 as well, but I'm going to fire them out. So we're really focused around distribution, relevance, and experience. And it's being really smart about where we put our time and effort. It's impossible to do everything and do everything perfectly right. So, we're really focused on where we do it, we will do it right. And distribution is key, especially within independents and on premise. So, targeting the right venues or the right stores where your product is relevant, and then picking the right product within your portfolio to be even more relevant. And experiences are key, especially as we're trying to recruit and engage consumers and bring them back into the category. And my tip is to be authentic and to be really easy to work with and invest in your relationships. Relationships are key in this industry, and it's probably one of the key learnings I've had since joining liquor a couple of years ago. So yeah, be authentic, do what you say you're going to do, and be easy to work with.
Wonderful, thanks. And Xavier.
Well, in terms of how we're seeing the future, I think it's just going to be business as usual and keep trying to break the barrier of entrance for wine and keep putting it in the forefront the new gen of producer varieties and iconic in Australia. That has been our vision and our purpose, and we'll keep smashing this. From a tip perspective to the winery, I'd say if only we'd love to see you more. We'd love to see more winemaker coming to the restaurants and doing rounds with the suppliers. We'd love to hear more about you. We'd love to sit down with you and have a chat and converse and connect, because it's all about connection. Then also, don't, I think, expect the new generation of drinker to be really well informed, and therefore let's talk to them in such a way that they don't feel dismissed, and probably change a little bit the narrative around all the one region in Australia and start going a bit deeper into the locality, the single vineyards. Let's keep educating the public, because it's all well to educate the sommelier, but we can't do all the job on our own, and it's relatively a passive way for us to promote the wine of Australia. So let's all come together and let's keep opening the platform of learning for the new generation, because we all know that a Chardonnay from Margaret River tastes big and rich, or at least this is the way how they feel, right? But there's so many nuances to the landscape in Australia, and I think it's time for us to put the second gear into really developing the narrative, I think.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Xavier. Thanks everyone for all of the panelists today for joining us. It's been extraordinary chats, really insightful, and really appreciate you making the time during what I know is a very busy time of the year in all of your respective businesses. Thank you for the generosity of sharing your knowledge. I've noticed there are a few more questions coming through, so we'll try and answer some of those offline and send around an email with some responses, because we've come to the completion for today. But thank you to everyone who tuned in. I believe this recording will be available online, and I'm sure Ruth will be able to confirm that. But cheers, guys, and to building connections and building relationships. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much. Before everyone goes, Alex is just going to flash up a quick poll. It's a really quick, just choose a number along a scale. We'd just love to know how relevant you found this webinar. So please do answer it. It really helps us to choose topics for next year. If something's relevant and interesting to our audience, we'll try to do it again, because you always capture new things and new ideas. So this is actually our last webinar for 2025. The next webinar won't be until February 2026. We're still choosing topics for next year, so feel free to email us if you have any ideas. So yeah, all members, you can access the last 3 years of webinars on our website. So if that's not a reason to become a member, I don't know what is. They're really fantastic resource to mine. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining us. I hope you have a great day. I hope the Christmas season goes well for everybody in retail, in on-premise, and everywhere in your own cellar doors. And thanks very much for joining Wine Communicators. See ya.